he could read the pitcher by examining just what he did prior to a pitch. And then he would signal to the batter, maybe just call a number out or a name out or something, and the batter would know that a curveball is coming. And it was that detective work that gave him the title Sherlock Holmes of baseball.
That was Tom Sullivan, author of the book Baseball's Sherlock Holmes, the biography of Danny Murphy of the Philadelphia Athletics. Hello and welcome to episode 129 of the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker. Sullivan will be my guest on the show today. He will talk about the life and career of Danny Murphy, who played for the A's in the early part of the 20th century. A solid ball player who deserves to get recognition even more than 100 years from his last big league game. Tom Sullivan is a member of the Irish American Baseball Society. You can join Tom as a member of the IABS by heading to irishbaseball.org. Thanks for being here, Tom.
You're welcome.
So as we get to this big milestone in the United States of the 250th anniversary of the country on July 4th of 2026, I have really wanted to go back and look at some Irish Americans, some Irish immigrants who had a huge impact on the country and, of course, specifically on the game of baseball. And I think that you have written a book about a really underrated figure in baseball, especially that I think most Irish Americans should know about this important character, and that is Danny Murphy. Now, if somebody tries to Google Danny Murphy or Daniel Murphy on Baseball Reference, there are a few options, but you are talking about the Danny Murphy who played for the Philadelphia A's around the turn of the 20th century. So why don't you give a little background into this particular Danny Murphy?
2026 will be the 150th anniversary of the birth of Danny Murphy. He was quite a baseball player. To give some examples of just how good he was, the first game he ever played for the Philadelphia Athletics, he went 6 for 6. He faced 3 pitchers that day, and the second one was Cy Young, and he homered off of Cy Young as one of his 6 hits. And let me just say that no other baseball player has ever gone 6 for 6 in the first day, on the first day that they played for a club. The following year, Danny was playing second base. Footnote that second base in the second. He was playing second base, and he recorded 11 assists at second base in a 9-inning game. That record was tied in 1939 by Yankee second baseman and not broken until 1970. So Danny held the record and eventually got it tied for a long time. Another example would be the 1910 World Series, where Danny drove in 9 runs during I think it was just a 5-game World Series. That record was tied by Lou Gehrig in 1927, but not broken until Yogi Berra broke it in 1955 or so. And that was subsequently broken by Bobby Richardson in around 1960 with 12 runs in it. I think that may have been a 7-game series. In any event, those are 3 examples. Another one is he holds the career triple record for any athletic. He had 102 triples while playing for the Philadelphia Athletics. And for example, Ricky Henderson, a great and fast baseball player, his career was 24 seasons long, and he only had 66.
Wow.
So Danny had a good number of triples. He was a hard-hitting baseball player. Connie Mack considered him a sweet hitter. 50 years after the fact, Connie Mack was still telling the story of Danny's first six hits as a Philadelphia Athletic. So those are some highlights of Danny's career.
I know that if a lot of people now would go back and look at his statistics, I mean, I have them right up in front of me right now, And through a modern lens, you might say, okay, like he seems like a pretty decent ball player, career 289 batting average. That's all right, 742 OPS. But when you consider that he was playing in the height of the dead ball era, I mean, this is the deadest the ball has ever been in the history of the sport. He was hitting for most of his career better than most players. He had an OPS plus of 124, which means he was 25% better than the average ball player offensively. So he was hitting the ball hard. You see things like 7 home runs in a season, 6 home runs, 4, and you think, well, that's not a lot, but they weren't hitting 50 home runs a year back then.
No,
They were hitting, 7, 8 home runs a year.
that's right. Your maximum would have been maybe 10 home runs for a year for the home run champion of baseball. And Danny was putting up 6, 7 home runs a year, at least on occasion. You're right about the dead ball era. I consider the first phase of the dead ball era to have ended in 1909. And at that point, Danny had played 8 seasons of the real dead ball era. In 1910, the owner of the Philadelphia Athletics also had a sporting goods company, and they produced a baseball in 1910 with a cork center. And that changed at least one aspect of dead ball, in that the ball was a bit livelier and it lasted a bit longer. One of the things about dead ball was they tried to play the whole game with the same ball. In modern baseball, you see they're changing the ball after 2 pitches so that the ball remains nice and sweet. But in dead ball era, by the time you were in the 9th inning, you were looking at a ball that was covered in muck and hard to see as it came towards you at the plate. And it was just very, very difficult.
Well, and the pitchers would be able to use the friction created by all the scuffs to throw some pretty wicked pitches as well. And you mentioned that new baseball in 1910. And if you look at the few years before 1910, he hit 301 in 1906, 271 in 07, 265, 281. And then all of a sudden in 1910, he jumps back up to 300. In 11, it's 329. It's 323 in 12. So he definitely did take advantage of that new baseball, but it really didn't start to get wound really tightly until about 1920.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I footnoted second base when I first mentioned the 11 assists. There was a baseball player that played with Danny in club baseball in New England before Danny went into the minors, who went on and became the coach at Dartmouth and Brown and one other college. Danny had initially gone to the majors after his first minor league season. The New York Giants took him aboard. The coach I mentioned at these colleges said that the Giants would be making a mistake if they didn't put Danny in the outfield, because that's where he really shined. And so basically, Connie Mack made the same mistake by putting him at second base, but he turned out to be a very good second baseman. It wasn't until 1908, I think, that he went into the outfield because they were having major problems with maintaining a good outfield in that year. And Danny went on to be an absolutely fantastic outfielder. And in the 1910 World Series, Ty Cobb was in the booth at the time and was truly amazed with Danny's ability to go after balls that were going into crowds. See, back in those days in the outfield, the excess crowd lined the outfield wall on the inside of the wall. And so you had them in the way when you were going for a ball near the fence, and Danny robbed one guy of a home run, and so forth in that game. So he was a great, great outfielder.
So the title of your book is Baseball's Sherlock Holmes, the biography of Danny Murphy of the Philadelphia Athletics. So where did he get this nickname of Baseball's Sherlock Holmes?
It came from a Hall of Fame umpire who also was a commentator in the newspaper. He had learned from Danny what Danny was doing at third base when he was coaching for the A's. Danny was hired by Connie Mack to come and coach the A's in 1920. They had been at the bottom of the league for the last 3 or 4 years, and there were a lot of young people on the A's. And Connie felt that Danny would be able to work with him. He knew how to talk to young guys. Danny at third base. Let me also state that Connie Mack didn't title Danny just a coach on the team. He made him the captain coach. Now, that's a very unique position because in the past there had been captain managers. When a certain guy went to a club, he was still playing baseball, and they used him as manager. But Connie Mack couldn't go on the field because he had always dressed in a suit, so he never had a baseball uniform on. So the captain of the A's did all the work of the manager when it came to on-field activities. You know, changing pitchers and moving the defense or talking to the umpires and so forth. So at third base, Danny was the captain coach, and he was using detective work at the time, which involved reading pitchers. He could read the pitcher by examining just what he did prior to a pitch. And then he would signal to the batter, maybe just call a number out or a name out or something, and the batter would know that a curveball is coming. And it was that detective work that gave him the title Sherlock Holmes of baseball, according to the writing of this particular umpire. That particular capability came from his days as a player with the Athletics, when they were using pitcher reading and other teams had no idea what they were doing. Most famously in the 1911 World Series, two of the best pitchers in baseball, Christy Mathewson and I can't remember his first name, but the last name, Card, could not figure at all what was happening in terms of their pitches being hit. And they even thought that the little crippled bat boy on the Athletics was stealing signs when he walked to get a bat. But it was pitcher reading that was being done by the A's, and they really had developed a great capability to do that with several players involved. And that's where Danny learned how to do it, and then he applied it in the 1920s.
What made you pick this particular figure to be the focus of your book?
Well, it all starts with my grandmother, who back in the 1950s, anytime the baseball came up, we might have a Little League uniform on, or there was a game on the television. She would say Danny Murphy was a great baseball player, and he lived down the street. And that's all she would say. And we never learned more about it. We were more interested in Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle and so forth, Willie Mays. After I retired, I ran across Danny Murphy's name, and I said, I've got to learn about him because I haven't known a thing about him in 60 years, you know. I did research. I ended up with a book that's nearly 500 pages long. And that's the benefit of the internet these days, that you can do such research. And that's how it came about. And I even found hometown newspapers. Danny lived in my hometown while he was a baseball player. He married a girl there. It was his first minor league team that in Norwich, Connecticut, that he joined. And I even found on the internet that my grandfather was the captain of Danny's bowling team. So it really made a big connection.
Well, that's incredible. And obviously, Daniel Francis Murphy. He's not hiding his Irish heritage very much there. He was a first generation Irish American in New England. And can you talk about his Irish heritage and how it influenced his life and how it influenced his early years?
Well, Danny was born in Philadelphia in 1876 to Daniel Francis Murphy Sr. and Mary Sullivan. And the father was a mill worker, and they were looking for more work, and they moved up to Rhode Island on the east side of Providence in a town called Olneyville. And Danny, he had, his mother gave birth 10 times, and 3 times she lost the baby in birth. And so Danny ended up with 7 brothers and sisters, only 1 sister. They all worked in the mill. Danny went to the mill. I don't think he went past the 6th grade, and he went to work in the mill. And he worked in the mill as a teenager as well, and into his early 20s when he was playing for club teams in New England, both in Falls River, Massachusetts, where Lizzie Borden had a place, and in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, where he got to work in a jewelry factory as part of the signing up for the club team for the city. So he spent a lot of time doing that before he ever went into the minors. So he had Irish parents. I was never able to find out where they came from in Ireland. I assume Mary Sullivan could have come from County Cork, because that's the hotbed of the Sullivans. But like my family, they had an outpost also in County Kerry. The Murphy family, of course, more widespread in Ireland. But I just couldn't connect the dots in terms of finding a ship they came over on and any information on their lineage. They didn't get married till after the Civil War, and it's possible that his father could have served in the Civil War, but I couldn't find that either, because there were a lot of Danny Murphys around.
And he obviously had a great relationship with another great Irish American, Cornelius McGillicuddy, also known as the great Connie Mack. And obviously, playing for Connie Mack for 12 years and then coming back and coaching for Connie Mack, there had to be a lot of respect that Mack had for Murphy.
On a sour note, in 1913, when Danny was captain of the athletics for 1912 and 1913, and he was injured in June of 1912, first part of June, and he never had recovered fully from a knee injury. So he played only sparingly in 1912 and 1913. He was captain of the team, and he made the mistake of using a pitcher in a baseball game against the Phillies. They had an annual game with the Athletics to see who was the city champion before the season started. And it was a 16-inning game. The guy's name was Boardwalk Brown. And Danny had him go the whole 16 innings because he was pitching so great. Connie Mack didn't like the idea that he had put this pitcher, who was in his 2nd year, in for so long in a non-routine game. Danny always followed Connie Mack's lead to the nth degree. And Danny had watched Connie Mack put in another first-year player in a regular season game and watch him pitch for 24 innings. This was a few years earlier. So it was Danny's belief that Connie would go along with something like this. But at the end of the 1911 season, Danny was in the dugout, and there was a situation in which there was runners on 2nd and 3rd. A batter was coming up that the crowd wasn't too, it was a home game in Philadelphia. The crowd wasn't too enthused about the player coming up with 2 outs. And they started crying out, "Murphy, Murphy, Murphy." Connie wouldn't put Murphy in the game. And the reason was apparently that he was going to let Danny Murphy go at the end of the season. It was all back to this Boardwalk Brown incident. a couple of years went by, and Danny started coaching a minor league team in New Haven, Connecticut. And Connie decided to make up with Danny and started supplying him with ball players. And Danny had 3 or 4 good years in New Haven as the manager there in New England before Connie hired him back to coach in 1920. So it was a little bit up and down just over the years, 1913, 14 or so.
You mentioned his knee injury, and if somebody goes and looks at the statistics, the initial thing that is going to pop off the page is that in leagues that are now recognized by Major League Baseball as being Major League Baseball, he played 16 seasons, which sounds like a pretty decent length of a career. However, the first 3 seasons of his career were shorter seasons, playing 22 games, 5 games, and 76 games. And then the last 4 years of his career were also short seasons. So he kind of only played like 9 to 10 full seasons of Major League Baseball.
I know he did with the Giants in 1900 and 1901. In 1902, he signed in July of the year. So he only started halfway through the season. Connie Mack always said, and he repeated himself in 1952 when he went up to Norwich for a celebration of the 50 years since Danny signed with the A's. He said that he was a much better baseball player than anybody knew. And the reason was that Danny was shy and humble. He just didn't want to be the center of attention. So he wasn't up for giving interviews to reporters, and which would have been the only opportunity you had to get your name in extra print back in those days. I won't argue that he had a Hall of Fame career, but he had an excellent career, a standout career, and he did some special things.
Yeah, I think that the knee injury, if you look at his statistical line, you can tell where that knee injury happened. And had it not happened, maybe he puts together another 5 years like that first 9. And he all of a sudden might have a case. But I do agree with you that he might be a little short with, what he actually ended up producing in the field. So you mentioned that he went on to coach in different leagues after his playing career was done. Was he a baseball lifer?
Yeah. No, after he left Philadelphia, he was signed by the Brooklyn Tip Tops, a Federal League team, and the Federal League was stepping to the plate and looked like it was going to be a successful endeavor. He played 2 years with them, and once again, it was the knee injury. He eventually had to quit the second year. And then he went on to coach New Haven, eventually the Athletics. And then after that, one of his young players that really was close to Danny, a guy named Stuffy McGinnis, the first baseman for the A's, asked him to come over and help him coach the Pittsburgh Pirates in the National League. That didn't go well because the owner of the team didn't want him to succeed, apparently. That's where his Major League Baseball career ended. He went on to live in Jersey City, New Jersey. His wife from Norwich had died with the Spanish flu in 1917 or 18. Danny's in-laws invited him to come to Jersey City, where he would live with them for the last 35 years of his life. And over there, he contributed to the local scene by coaching kids in the schoolyard and also coaching what might have been a Babe Ruth League team and so forth. So he had baseball in his blood, and he never totally retired from it.
Such a fascinating story about a baseball player that I just don't think a lot of people know existed. And I'm really glad that your book is out there and that people can find it and learn about this baseball player who, like you said, probably wasn't Hall of Fame worthy, but at least is worthy of having his story remembered. The book is Baseball's Sherlock Holmes, the biography of Danny Murphy of the Philadelphia Athletics. I know that you can get it on Kindle for $6.99.
You know, a couple of summers ago, the Baseball Hall of Fame accepted it for their library. So that pleased me a lot, because that meant Danny was in the Hall of Fame in the end, in that form. His baseball club from the 1910 and 1911 series is also in the Hall of Fame.
That is amazing. Tom Sullivan, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Well, I enjoyed it a lot, Rick. Thanks for asking me.
I'm your host, Rick Becker, and this has been episode 129 of the Irish Baseball Podcast.